But what I oppose is putting everyone in two categories based on their heritage and saying you have this role to play in society because of things that happened 200 years before you were born. That is fundamentally disempowering. It sorts us into victims and villains rather than asking what are we actually going to do to make a better world today and tomorrow.
I mean, let's turn to a bit of controversy and put it in the context, I guess, of coalition relationships. The Treaty Principles Bill, obviously it's caused a fair amount of contention through 2024 and presumably that will carry on and through 2025. But both National and New Zealand First aren't going to vote for it when it comes back from Select Committee. And the Prime Minister's been quite openly critical of it. Has that affected the relationship at all?
No, because it's no surprise. It's not an issue that Chris wants to take on. That's okay. I believe it's an issue that's essential to take on. And while I hear the people who say, oh, but there's so many other things that are important, I think if New Zealand is going to have a long-term future as a first world prosperous country, then we have to establish that our basic constitutional setting is equal rights for each human being. So long as you have a constitutional setting that says your fealty is to a group and that group is founded in ancestry, then you're going to have real trouble, and the least of which will be distraction from solving real problems. So, I know there's people who'd rather not have the debate, but I suspect it was the same when Michael Laws started the euthanasia debate with his bill in 1995. I suspect it was the same when Venn Young started the homosexual law reform debate in the early 70s. They introduced bills that got shot down in flames, and then the ideas that they put in the public arena became inevitable. And I think that will happen with the treaty and equal rights.
Look, I'm Pākehā, but so do you really think, though, that someone of Māori heritage has some privilege or advantage over me?
Well, you only have to look at the number of policies under the previous government that directly chose or favoured you based on your ancestry, whether it was procurement quotas at central and local government level, membership of certain boards, most notably Three Waters, having a Māori and a non-Māori entity within an organisation, for example, Plant Variety Rights Committee, something as inane as that, or two chief executives at the Human Rights Commission. That's just a few off the top of my head. You don't qualify to participate in any of those because of your ancestry. And then you come to more substantial stuff. You look at Ports of Tauranga waiting 5 years to get a cultural impact assessment that hasn't been forthcoming from local iwi. You can't be involved in making a cultural impact assessment. You don't get consulted as an iwi authority because you're not Māori, and therefore it is absolutely essential that we get to the point where all New Zealanders, by dint of being human, have equal rights.
But would having equal rights in that sense, would that mean going back and then looking at the treaty settlements again? Because one could argue that iwi haven't been treated equally in terms of the settlements they've got because they've essentially got a fraction of what they lost. Will that be the implication?
No, I certainly wouldn't want to reverse treaty settlements, and we've been very clear that the bill doesn't change those. I think your wider point is that Māori are disadvantaged. Yes, some are, but not all Māori, and not all disadvantaged people are Māori. This is a country that has people who have fled Cambodia, people who have fled Ukraine recently. This is a country that still has some people who actually survived the Holocaust. I have ancestors who didn't leave Scotland because they were having a great time. All of us can point to things that are good and bad in our heritage, and I'm actually in favour of giving everyone an equal right to live their life, to express their culture, to speak their language, to get an education that suits them. I mentioned I've just been involved in setting up a Māori-oriented charter school in the far north near Kaitaia. I think everyone should have the chance to do things like that. What I oppose is putting everyone in two categories based on their heritage and saying you have this role to play in society because of things that happened 200 years before you were born. That is fundamentally disempowering. It sorts us into victims and villains rather than asking what are we actually going to do to make a better world today and tomorrow.
Politically, is this going to be the main focus for ACT, at least in the first few months of 2025 until it goes through the Select Committee process?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, it's going to be a big event, and yes, it's an outcrop of ACT's basic belief system. ACT's believes that each of us should have the ability to make a difference in our own lives and the lives that we care about. That's why we care about property rights and low taxes and keeping the streets safe from criminals. We want people to be able to accumulate stuff and make tomorrow better than today was through their own efforts. But the other thing that we oppose, because of our core belief system, is we oppose discrimination based on things that you can't change because they happened before you were born.
I mean, Christopher Luxon says 2025 too has to be a focus in terms of on economic growth. From your perspective, what needs to happen to get the New Zealand economy growing again?
Well, a few things. First of all, red tape and regulation. So all the things I talked about, AML, triple CFA, RMA, Health and Safety at Work Act, sectoral reviews like we're doing in areas like ECE and animal and plant products. We need to go on a massive red tape cutting drive, and actually that's largely what the government's doing. I mean, there's all those ones I mentioned. There's also people like Chris Penk with earthquakes and building materials and techniques being deregulated. These are all really important, and they're happening right across the board. The second thing is we need to maintain our nerve when it comes to the fiscals. So, yep, sounds like the accounts are going to be pretty bad. That may be true, may not be true, but what I do know is that we have to get back in the black as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves with another disaster, another earthquake, another pandemic, whatever, and the shock absorber won't be there for New Zealand. Meanwhile, we can't have as many hospital beds because we're paying interest on our debt. So there's a few issues there that I think are really worthwhile sticking to. Another one that I haven't mentioned, but I think is as important, if not more important than some of those others, we've got to reconnect with the rest of the world. So my work on the Overseas Investment Act, we're going to flip the script away from it's a privilege to invest in New Zealand. You must prove that you are doing that your investment is a benefit to New Zealand, even though you've already got a willing buyer and a willing seller. Instead, we'll say if you've got a willing buyer and a willing seller, then unless we can show that there's a harm to the rest of New Zealand, you're free to continue your transaction.
For more content just like this and all the latest business and political news, head over to mbr.co.nz.